The 2026 World Cup is almost here, and with that being said, in today's video, I'm going to be telling you guys the top 10 teams that just missed out on World Cup qualification. Now, these aren't technically the 10 best teams that failed to qualify for the World Cup, but these are the 10 best teams that just missed out, teams that maybe had one more game or a couple more games to qualify, but they just missed out. And without further ado, let's get right into this video. Starting off in 10th place, I've gone with the United Arab Emirates. Now, in my opinion, the greatest achievement in their history was when they did qualify for the 1990 World Cup in Italy, and that was the only time that they've ever successfully qualified for the World Cup. Now, in recent years, we saw them get third place in the 2015 Asian Cup, and in 2019, they did reach the semifinals, but ended up getting battered by Qatar. Now, if you remember the Asian Cup qualification, UAE did finish in second place behind Qatar, and because of that, they were sent to play in the playoff game, and that playoff game came against Iraq. And in those two games, they were very close. In the first match, it ended in a 1-1 draw, all to play for in the second match. But in the second match, sadly, they conceded a 107th minute penalty to Iraq. It was 1-1. It was about to go to penalties, but in the 107th minute, Al Amadi put the ball in the back of the net, sending Iraq to the intercontinental qualification, which obviously they did end up winning to advance to the World Cup. And sadly for UAE, once again, they missed out on yet another World Cup. Moving on to the next country, I'm going to go for Kosovo. Now, Kosovo have never qualified for a World Cup in their history, and they were actually only recently recognized by both FIFA and UEFA within the last decade as an international country. In Euro 2020 was their closest time to ever qualifying for a major competition, as they made it to the playoff stage, but they couldn't qualify. They just missed out. And once again, for the 2026 World Cup, Kosovo just missed out on qualification. Obviously, they made it to the playoff stage once again, which was an incredible feat by them. And with some of the incredible attackers that they have, players like Zagrova, who's a great player for Juventus, and also Muriqi, who is one of the top goal scorers in La Liga, a lot of people thought that they may be able to upset these teams in the playoffs and possibly make it to the World Cup. And in that first game, they were fantastic. We saw them beat Slovakia 4-3 in one of the most entertaining playoff games. It was incredible. They scored loads of goals. We saw goals from Aslani, Muslia, and now Slovakia did also score a few goals, and that tells you a little bit of something about Kosovo's defense, how they aren't the most resolute on the defensive end, but in the attack, they were one of the best teams in the qualifiers. But sadly for Kosovo, in the final match against Turkey, one goal separated the two teams. We saw a goal from Aktürkoğlu, and Kosovo struggled to score, and that was really surprising after how good they were in the previous game against Slovakia. And even in this game, they had some decent chances, but they just couldn't score against Turkey. Obviously, Turkey ended up advancing to the World Cup, and sadly for Kosovo, they did just miss out. Moving on to the 8th country, I'm gonna go for Jamaica. Honestly, Jamaica really fumbled this World Cup, and they should have 100% made it to the World Cup, especially in the CONCACAF qualification. How they didn't make it to this World Cup is crazy. Look at these poor results in the qualification from Jamaica. We saw them lose 2-0 against Curaçao. They drew 1-1 against Trinidad, and then they drew 0-0 against Curaçao. This obviously allowed Curaçao to make it directly to the World Cup, and Jamaica had to play in the intercontinental playoffs. In the playoffs, the first game, they were coming up against New Caledonia, who are ranked 150th place by FIFA. Everyone was saying that Jamaica would destroy them 3-4, 5-0. The game ended 1-0, and New Caledonia actually had a couple chances to possibly get a draw. But in the final match, they were coming up against DR Congo, and that was always going to be tough for them, especially with DR Congo having a very solid defensive unit. It was always going to be hard for Jamaica to score. Now, once again, they did have a couple chances, but nothing really major. DR Congo probably could have scored 3 or 4 goals in this game. It did end 1-0, but Jamaica did miss out on the World Cup. Moving on to 7th place, I've gone with Poland. After qualifying for the last 2 consecutive World Cups, and in 2022, they made it to the knockout stages for the first time in their history. A lot of people had high expectations for Poland, especially getting to the playoff stage. Most people, including myself, thought that Poland would 100% advance. And obviously, as you can see here, it came down to 2 games. The first game in the semifinals was against Albania, which was a fairly comfortable win for Poland. They got 2 goals. Albania were the first to score, but Poland were definitely the better team and definitely deserved to make it to the final. But in that final match, that is where Poland struggled, where they were coming up against Sweden, who were incredibly poor in the qualification. Sweden didn't even get a single win in the World Cup qualification. The only reason why they made it to the playoffs was because of how they performed in the Nations League, which I think is a little bit of a scam. But against Sweden, Poland just weren't up for it. We saw an early goal from Lenga, then Poland came back with 2 goals, but at the end of the game, Viktor Gyökeres got that 88th minute winner to shock a lot of people. Poland probably could have scored multiple goals in this game. They probably could have tied it up, and they probably could have taken this game to extra time. But at the end of the day, Sweden surprisingly ended up making it to the World Cup slightly over Poland, who missed out. Moving on to the 6th country, I've gone with Venezuela. This one breaks my heart, bro. Venezuela were so close to qualifying for the World Cup. They were literally 1 game away, but they missed out on the last CONMEBOL match day. So sad. In the CONMEBOL qualification, Venezuela finished in 8th place, where 7th place in Bolivia ended up playing in the Intercontinental Playoffs. Now, Venezuela were actually sitting at 7th place, but in their last few games, obviously in the last game they got destroyed by Colombia, but even in the few games before that game against Colombia, we saw them lose against Uruguay, against Argentina, and then obviously that final match against Colombia. And sadly for them, Bolivia went on a little bit of a hot streak at the end and surprisingly made it in 7th place. It was this surprising win for Bolivia against Brazil in the last game, and that's why Venezuela thought they were 100% heading to the World Cup, because against Brazil, no one really expected Bolivia to win, but obviously they were playing at El Alto. They had the height advantage, and they ended up beating Brazil 1-0 to finish in 7th place ahead of Venezuela. They went to the Intercontinental Playoff. Obviously ended up missing the World Cup, but sadly for Venezuela, they didn't even get that far. Moving on to 5th place, I've gone with Denmark. Honestly, I thought Denmark were 100% heading to this World Cup, and especially if we look at how they performed in recent international competitions, in recent Euros, they've been a very, very underrated team, almost like a dark horse in some recent international competitions. But for them to completely miss out on this World Cup, I did not expect that. First of all, it looked like they were 100% going to go to the World Cup, because in the World Cup qualification, they were sitting in 1st place, but in the last match day, we saw them come up against Scotland, and Scotland completely demolished them. McTominay got one of the best bicycle kicks of the season. Scotland won 4-2, and if you look at the table, they just beat Denmark by winning this game. If Scotland did not get and win this game, if they got a draw, then Denmark would have advanced on goal difference, but Scotland got the win, and now they advanced. But even in the playoff stage, a lot of people thought that Denmark would most likely qualify. They were in the same playoff bracket as North Macedonia, Czech Republic, and Ireland, and in that first game against North Macedonia, they smoked them 4-0. We saw goals from Damsgaard, Isaacson, Norgard, and that shows you how good this Denmark team is. If you look at their lineup with players like Mæhle, players like Denmark, Højbjerg, Højlund up front, obviously they have Isaacson, they have Helmond, who's a very, very underrated midfielder, they have Norgard, they have some fantastic players, and with the experience of Denmark doing very well in recent competitions, a lot of people thought after this 4-0 win against North Macedonia, they would 100% make it. But then against Czechia, that's where they struggled. It ended 2-2 after a very late goal by Denmark, but in penalties, they really, really struggled. They missed multiple penalties. As you can see, Rasmus Højlund hitting the crossbar. We saw 2 other misses, and Czech Republic, they got through against Ireland on penalties, and once again, they did it against Denmark. And sadly for Denmark, we will not be seeing them at this World Cup. Moving on to 4th place, I've gone with Cameroon. Cameroon became the first African nation in history to reach the World Cup quarterfinals, which they did in 1990. An incredible run by Cameroon, and a run that will be remembered for history. But recently, the World Cup gods have not been on their side. First of all, we need to talk about Cameroon in the qualification, because honestly, they should have 100% advanced. They were in a fairly easy group with the likes of Eswatini, Mauritius, Angola, Libya, and obviously Cape Verde. And no one expected Cape Verde to finish in 1st place. Obviously, a very small island nation, and a lot of people thought a big footballing nation in Cameroon would 100% make it to 1st place. Now, yes, they did suffer from a few backlash. Obviously, Eto'o being at the head of that organization, there was some problems, and also a few of their good players, for example, Zambo Anguissa, was suffering from injury throughout the qualifying campaign. But for them to come 2nd place against Cape Verde, that's shocking. And what's even more shocking is that in the first head-to-head against Cape Verde, they won 4-1, an incredible win. But in the second head-to-head, we saw them lose 1-0. That was a very, very poor result for Cameroon. But even other games, we saw them draw both fixtures against Angola, which was incredibly poor by them. And we also saw them draw against Eswatini, who finished last place in the group. Cameroon couldn't score against them. That's what really caused them to struggle. Moving on to third place, I've gone with Hungary. I feel like Hungary in recent years have been really getting better in international competitions. We see a lot of great youngsters coming out of Hungary. Obviously, Szoboszlai is probably their star player playing for Liverpool, probably Liverpool's best player this season. But I was shocked when they didn't qualify for the World Cup. Now, Hungary didn't even make it to the playoff stage because they were in the same group as Ireland and obviously against Portugal. Now, we did see them get some very good results in this group. Obviously, they got draws against Ireland. They won majority of their games and they even drew that game 2-2 against Portugal. But their downfall came in the very last game against Ireland. All they needed was to not lose. If they didn't lose, they would have made it. A draw, a win, they would have 100% made it. As you can see on the table, they were a point ahead of Ireland. So even a draw would have allowed them to go through. And it looked like they were going to go through. Obviously, Ireland scored by Troy Parrott in the 15th minute from a penalty. But Hungary scored 2 goals within the first half. They were leading 2-1. And a lot of people thought they're 100% going through. But Troy Parrott, the man who got it done for Ireland against Portugal, gets it done for them again against Hungary, scoring 2 late goals in the 80th minute and in the 96th minute. Incredible scenes. After beating Portugal, they go ahead and beat Hungary to beat Hungary into second place, and Ireland make the playoffs and Hungary are sadly knocked out. Moving on to second place, I've gone with Nigeria. Bro, it's actually crazy how the Super Eagles have failed to qualify for the last 2 World Cups in a row. They're almost as bad as the next country. But honestly, Nigeria did not deserve to make it to the World Cup. I remember with only a couple African qualifiers to go, they were sitting around 4th place. They were behind Benin. They were obviously behind South Africa. And at one point, they were even behind Lesotho. We saw them get so many draws in the qualification, getting 5 draws, the most out of any African team. And for Nigeria, a team who are probably one of the best teams in Africa with star strikers, star attackers, players like Ademola Lookman, players like Victor Osimhen, players like Boniface, players like Iwobi, so many star attackers, Chukwueze. They have incredible players. For them to struggle this much against the likes of Zimbabwe, Rwanda, Lesotho, even Benin is crazy. And they almost didn't even have a chance to play in the playoffs because they were about to be behind Benin. But obviously on the last match day, they did end up getting a very, very impressive result. 4-0 win against Benin to put them just ahead of Benin to play in the playoffs. But in that final match against DR Congo, they were poor. They were extremely poor. And after scoring 3 minutes in, all they needed to do was keep a clean sheet, maybe score another goal. They just completely fell apart. They didn't look good on the attack, the midfield, the defense, and realistically with the attack that Nigeria has, they should have definitely tried to score another goal. But Mishak Elliott scored in the 32nd minute. Nothing happened for pretty much the whole rest of the game, and in penalties, Nigeria capitulated and DR Congo advanced. We saw Calvin Bassey miss a penalty, we saw Moses Simon miss a penalty, and we also saw Ajayi miss a penalty as well. DR Congo advanced to the Intercontinental Playoffs and obviously eventually to the World Cup. And moving on to the first country on the list, I've gone with Italy. Honestly, I don't really want to talk about this. I'll make it as short as possible, but simply, Italy are shit. And as an Italian fan, this was a complete disgrace. 3 World Cups I thought I would never, ever, ever, ever hear in my life. I don't even remember the last time they played in a World Cup. Now, to be fair to Italy, in the qualification, they were very good. Not against Norway. Against Norway, they were trash. But against all other teams, they were very good. We saw them win every other game in the qualification. And in majority of other groups, 18 points would have 100% had you advance into the World Cup. But sadly for Italy, we had Norway in our group. And Norway completely destroyed Italy. We saw them beat Italy 3-0 and then 4-1 in the last fixture. In that last game, a lot of people had hope for Italy. They had to win like 7 or 8-0. But if they did, then they could advance to the World Cup. And with that early goal from Esposito in the 11th minute, a lot of people thought, okay, there's a possibility. 1 goal every 10 minutes. It's not impossible. But then Antonio Nusa, Erling Haaland, and Strand Larsen had other things to say about it. And Italy got completely destroyed. Absolutely battered, honestly. This shit was so bad. And it does show you the levels of Norway's attack and how incredibly strong they are and how incredibly strong they are on the counterattack. but it also shows you all the problems with the Italian national team. From the president of the FIGC, who has finally resigned, the coach in Gattuso, and everyone else across the staff, it was not good enough. Not enough young talent, not enough talent in the Serie A, and honestly, Italian football has completely fallen off. But that is the end of this video. Those were my top 10 best teams that just missed out on the 2026 World Cup. If you guys agree with this list, remember to leave a comment down below. But if you disagree, remember to leave your top 10 list down below, and I'll be sure to reply to every single comment. As always, if you enjoyed this video, remember to leave a like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and stay tuned for more videos.